Let's get after it. There you go.
Welcome to the Gold Medal Excellence Podcast. I'm your host, AJ Payne, along with my co-host, Chris Asher. And today in the program, we're joined by Coach Anthony Veney. Coach Veney, thanks for coming on the program.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good to see you, Coach. It's been a while.
Hey, it's always good to see you, and really proud of the work you've been doing over the years since we met at Cal State Northridge all those years ago. And I saw the work that you were doing, constantly doing for promoting the sport when I would see you at UCLA. So, and continue to see the programs that you're putting out. So, really proud of the work you're doing for the sport.
No, thank you. And this was AJ's idea. He's like, Coach, we need to do a podcast. And I was like, nobody wants to see me in a podcast. And I thought about it, and I said, I got some good people to talk to. I think we got some knowledge and some people, you know, a guy like you, Coach, you've been around for years. I'm sure some of your alums, especially when see someone to see and hear what you got to say. So that's why I brought you here. So
thank you.
Yeah, let's get going.
Awesome. So to start off, talk about what you were like growing up, where you're from, and what your early playing career was like.
Wow. Let's see, I'm gonna have to get in my time machine now and take a little walk back. Born and raised in Compton, grew up on 135th Street in Central, just down the street from Centennial High School, 126th Street Elementary School, Vanguard Junior High, Centennial High School. And in fact, when I ran my first race ever, I was a seventh grader, and I ran a cross-country race and got a ninth place medal, and was coming home and walked by my neighbor, and he asked me how I did, and I said I got ninth place, and he looked at the medal and he said, wow, you didn't win? And that sort of stoked my fire at that point, and started to run some races. And that was back when junior high there was no middle school. Junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th grades. Yeah. So I ran track, actually ran my first real track race when I was very young. Mount Sac, somebody at the Parks and Recreation area in just across the street from Centennial asked me if I wanted to run at Mount Sac, and I said, what's that? And they anchored me on the 4x200 relay at the Mount Sac relays. And they said, when you get the baton, catch everybody. But they didn't tell me I had to stay in my lane. So I cut in and I caught everybody, and we won. And I walked right over to the medal table to see what I was getting. And somebody told me, I didn't know what a DQ was until they told me. So I had to learn the hard way. That was sort of my first indoctrination into the sport on the track. But you know, ran 660. I'm kind of dating myself now with yards, distances, and ran 660 in junior high. Then I got to Centennial High School and worked with two great men, Frank Hicks and Eddie Washington. Eddie still lives out in the same house in Carson, when it used to just be oil fields out before the Carson Mall blew up out in that whole Del Amo area. And I ran 152, 419 in the mile, 925 for 2 miles. And I got a full scholarship to run for the Bruins. And
that was our next question. We were gonna ask Alex, what was it about your high school career and your recruiting?
You know, it was really interesting. I was, the 6th or 7th fastest 17-year-old in the country at 880 yards, and ranked in the top 20 of the 20 best high school boys. And I was being recruited. I loved Oregon. I loved UCLA growing up as a kid, and I loved University of Kansas. Really wanted to go to Kansas to be with Jim Ryan, the world record holder. But I had a terrible CIF finals and finished in 6th, and they took 5 to the state meet, and just didn't have a good day. And as I'm leaving the stadium, I see Jim Bush and Tom Tellez, and they look at me and they say, Tony, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm not really sure what I want to do. Didn't have a really good race. And then Jim said something to me that has resonated with me for decades. He said, Tony, today was the biggest race of your life. And I thought, coach, if you're trying to make me feel better, you're not doing a very good job of it, because I just ran the worst race that I could possibly run. He said, no, listen to me. This was the biggest race of your life today. And he said, we'd like you to run for UCLA so that we get the benefit of all those todays that are going to come in. I signed with the Bruins. I couldn't wait for the letter of intent to come in the mail, and ended up being on part of two national championship teams. Didn't have the honor of scoring a point at any of those nationals, but we were national champs my freshman year. My sophomore year, we were national champs. I did make it to the meet that year. My sophomore and junior years, didn't make it my senior year. I had made the qualifying standard, but Coach Bush was so loaded, he had to pick somebody. He had to pick all the sprinters and all the other guys that went. And Benny Brown was part of that team, and Maxie Parks, and just some major Hall of Famers within the track program. But I had a great career. I ran 147.8. I ran 406 in the mile. I even split 47 on the 4x4, and graduated with a BA in history.
Yeah, let's go back a little. Let's talk about your recruiting process. I just remember some stories. These are fun to me. I still remember these. We've had long talks. I remember you said you went to Kansas on a recruiting visit, and
boy, I tell you what,
Ryan was your thing, and I think you said you went to Oregon, but I think you said Kansas. You went to the basketball game and said, "Oh wow, man, look at this."
It was
Someone
incredible.
May have said they're only here because it's freezing outside.
I had my Letterman jacket on, and I thought that's all I needed. And when I arrived in Kansas City, Missouri, to drive into Kansas City, to go to the scoreboard clock at the airport said 1 degree. And I just didn't, I was freezing. I didn't think, I said, this is terrible. I don't know what I'm doing here in Kansas. But then I saw a guy cross-country skiing to class. And I thought, I want to go to school here. And I went to Allen Fieldhouse and saw the great Bud Stallworth drop a ton of points on Kansas State. And at that point, I saw the student body waving their hands, going rock, chalk, Jayhawk in the last minute of the game. It was like the wheat fields of Kansas. And to have them announce my name and to stand up there and be recognized at the track meet was an amazing deal. And I got a lot of interest really early because I had won the Southern Counties track meet early in the year, went 152.9 for 880 yards, and got my name in the paper and started to get tons of recruiting. And I was even considering Cheney State College because they were recruiting me, because I thought it would be great to hear the announcer say, "It's Veney from Cheney." I sort of thought to myself, what a great thing for my parents to hear that. And SC recruited me, and I got a really nice recruiting trip over with the Trojans, and almost signed a letter of intent with SC. And but I showed it to my high school coaches. I had actually signed a letter of intent to go to SC, and my head coach Eddie Washington tore it up. And I thought, what are you talking about? What are you doing? This is a full scholarship to SC. He said, well, you have to understand that you need to ask a lot of different questions about how they train you. Are you going to be trained like when you were trained in high school? And Kansas, Oregon, and UCLA had answered all those questions for me. They had asked them and answered them. I said, you haven't heard anything from SC. And so he said, they'll send you another one if you decide that that's what you want to do. So a lot of the local schools, Arizona State, BYU, got a lot of interest from a lot of different schools. And in the beginning, to be perfectly honest, my dad didn't know what this running stuff was about. Saw me getting up early in the morning, running 7-8 miles in the morning, then having track practices after. But then when the recruiting letters started to pour in, all of a sudden, one Sunday morning, he comes in my bedroom and says, "Aren't you getting up to run?"
He sees it.
It's time for you to go for a little run. And so, he and my mom really got behind me on that, and I ended up being the first Veney west of the Rocky Mountains to go and get a college degree. So that was a big deal to my family and all of my relatives.
Just a little more before Alexander asks the next question, more about UCLA. But how was the recruiting process back then? You know, you got the internet and stuff now. Even when I was in high school, you had the LA Times with results or track and field news. You know, you're a little older than me. How did Kansas and them find you? Did you send them results? Did they how would they know who you were from Compton Centennial, like out of state schools?
Track and field news. Everybody had track and field news. It
Right.
was literally the Bible of the sport. And I even had a subscription so I could show my parents my name and the results and see the things. And I actually led the nation for a couple of months. Um, and that was a big deal. And the college coaches all had access, especially to the big meets. And the LA Times was amazing. The LA Times would put results. We would have dope sheets when we would have Compton versus Centennial track meets. I mean, track and field was just amazing before the money really got involved in the other professional sports. And track held an equal quality position with a lot of the other sports. And if you looked at the Texas relays, which was even huge then, uh, everybody ran track in Texas that played football. If you played football, if you played basketball, if you played baseball, but you ran track at the Texas relays. So results were really easy to come by because all the major newspapers uh, were printing. Like I said, track and field news printed an issue every 2 weeks. So results were just pouring out. And when you think about it, when I say pouring out, when compared to the internet and everything that's going on now, I mean, it was very, very fast. And so a lot of the colleges were literally calling the newspapers all over the country looking for track meet results. They knew what the big meets were in California and across the country. And they would get teletypes and machines were just blowing up with track and field results all over the country. So, UCLA got in touch with me during my junior year when I had run 4:19 in the mile. And that's when they started recruiting me. And actually, UCLA recruited me to be a miler. And I really thought I was going to be the next Jim Ryan.
Wow.
Then you move on to UCLA to start your collegiate track and field career. Talk more about the transition going from high school to college and what it was like competing for UCLA.
Boy, the first year it was really tough for me. It wasn't ring go to first period, ring go to second period. I was getting up whenever I felt like it, going to class when I felt like it, and sometimes I didn't feel like it, and got into a little academic trouble myself. I mean, I was a 3.9 coming out of high school. I had a really good, solid SAT score, and uh, luckily, after my freshman year, I ran poorly. I PR'd in a mile, but my 800 got actually slower. I only ran 154, but I went from 4:19 to 4:13, and then 4:11, and really started to see that. Jim Bush was coaching the track team and the distance runners, and after my freshman year, Jim felt that he had such a great sprint team that he needed to depend on that. So he turned his attention to a young coach at Carson High School by the name of Hal Harkness.
Oh
And
yeah, he
Hal
was the
came
LA
in,
City commissioner, right? LA City
yes,
section commissioner for years for the
yes.
CIF. Okay.
And Hal came in and really made me believe and helped me to believe that I could be one of those guys. And he changed my whole attitude about training. He told me that if I wanted to really be good, I really needed to take the next step that all the better guys do. He says, I've talked to Jim Ryan, I've talked to these guys. He would tell me, he says, um, you're gonna have to stop being afraid of being uncomfortable. Because when I was in high school, I could beat guys. I didn't have to be uncomfortable until the end of the season. But when I got my freshman year, I was uncomfortable every race, and it really bothered me. But Hal really encouraged me. I dedicated myself to the following summer and upped my mileage and running cross country, which really was the key, one of the keys to me being better. And the next year, I went 148.5, was all pack eight. Uh, Pack eight, boy, talk about it now. And I was all pack eight, and I was third, fourth, and fifth my last 3 years in the conference. And boy, I just had to go up against a guy by the name of Rick Brown, who won 4 straight Pac 8 titles in the 800. Then I had to go up against Robinson, who went to Cal also, and and had to go up against really good guys. And then there was Rayfield Beaton, who came over to SC, and he was a 146 guy. Yeah, I ran against
City
Pepe
High
for
School
years.
coach.
Yeah,
Coach Beaton.
and ran against Pepe for a couple of years. Luckily, I won the 800 the last 2 years in the SC UCLA dual meet, and in my senior year, we beat Pepe. I had to. Luckily, I had some really great milers, and they felt that the only way they could beat us is to have Pepe double, and they beat him up pretty good in the mile, and he couldn't even take the line in the 800. Made it a cakewalk for me, but we were still running. We were still really losing the meet, and a freshman by the name of Willie Banks jumped out of his mind. Willie beat Jerry. He beat gosh, I can't believe Randy Williams, who
Randy
was
Williams from Fresno Edison, who went
yeah,
to USC. He won the
yeah,
Olympics, didn't he?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And Randy was a 26-foot jumper, and Willie Banks all of a sudden went 25-11 to win the long jump. And on his last jump, the fans started to clap. That's when I remember it first starting. And Willie got the crowd going, and you just saw this glazed look on his eyes, and he came down. And I didn't want, I was tired. I didn't want to run the 4x4. And so as soon as he landed in the pit, I came over and sort of nudged my head between the officials as they measured it. And he had gone 55 feet to win on his last jump.
Wow.
And we won the meet 70 to 75. And we had won. Back then they had a actual dual meet national championship. And we won it 4 years in a row. And Jim was a real slick dude. Jim would look at the top 5 teams in the nation every year at the NCAAs, and he would invite them to UCLA. We beat Kansas, we beat Tennessee, we brought everybody that was good, and plus we would win. We would beat Oregon and UCLA and USC. So we were crowned the national champion dual meet winner for 4 years. Didn't lose a dual meet, and because we had double duels at the time, so SC would run against Cal, we'd run against Stanford, and we took the points, and we had won over 30 straight over my 4-year career with the Bruins. So, got a great degree. Jim, I needed an extra quarter to finally get my degree. Started redshirted for cross country, and Jim made sure, he says, Tony, I made a promise, and even though your 4 years is up, we're going to pay for your school and make sure that you get your degree. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience for me.
That is awesome. I was going to say, wow, that's amazing. For people that don't know, Willie Banks was an Olympic champion, right, Tony? A world record holder in triple jump.
World record holder, and it's amazing that Willie could jump and never got that big medal. He was a world record holder, jumped one of the first men to jump in the high 58s. When I started coaching in high school, I piled all my high school athletes. I was at St. Bernard's High School in 1979. One of my first high school coaching gigs, and we drove down to San Diego to watch Willie triple jump at the old Muhammad Ali indoor track and field meet that they used to have down in the sports arena in San Diego.
Wow. Just shortly, because we got time limits and stuff, but there's one story that you told me I'd like to share a little bit. Can you talk to me about, you said you went to a meet, I think at Oregon, or maybe you were running with Prefontaine. I think one thing you said, you ran against Oregon and they had a dope sheet. You said they would have dope sheets. These guys are going to get first to last. And I said, what lane is Veney in? Well, he's 8th. I think you said that to me, or you said people know about Steve Prefontaine, but you said you ran, or can you elaborate a little bit? Because, that's incredible.
It was, I was a sophomore, and Jim had wanted me to get ready for the mile, but our milers, our 800 men had been underperforming, and I had run a PR of 150.7 at a double dual meet at the Coliseum against Stanford. And I had run 408 in the mile. I got pushed around pretty good. So Hal Harkness came up to me and says, if you want Jim to get off your back, you better go and run a good 880. And I ran 150 point, and they put me in the 8. And I came in with the slowest PR of all the 800 meter runners. And to see 8,000 people packed in to see the Ducks, and course, we started off the meet terrible. We dropped the stick in the 4x1. Prefontaine leads a 1-2-3 sweep in the mile. My roommate at the time, Gordon Ennis from Upland High School, in his first ever steeplechase runs 9:04, which was extraordinary to be able to run that fast as a freshman. And so when it came time for me to get on the track, I'm hearing the announcer call all these stats about every guy. And the night before, they talked about the dope sheet and they scored the meet. And they were saying, well, it's everybody gets to score on this crazy European scoring schedule. And they said, well, what about Veney? He says, well, I figure Veney will probably get a point. He might get a point. There are 8 guys in the race. I figure he'll be 8th. And, and Hal Harkness, he says, Tony, just run the race we've talked about. And we put it out on the track. And I got into lane 8. And they had announced everybody's stats. They talked about Steve Bentz, the duck, and they said Steve's dad works here, his mom's here, he's a great runner, he's all this. And then they said, and in lane 8, Tony Veney. That was it. So I could have sort of jogged out onto the track and cut in and took the lead and never gave it up. And I went from 150.7 down to 149.6, won the race, and the place went mad. I mean, I could not believe that they cheered for me the way they did. They made me, Hal pushed me out on the track and said, take a victory lap. But I don't think people realize how great Prefontaine was when I'm warming up for the mile and Pre comes jogging into the stadium and it just started to swell. Pre. And it just got louder and louder and louder. And he ran 3:56. He ran 13:10 for 3 miles. And you have to understand that that's when it was just men. So take whatever recovery you have today and cut it in half.
Wow.
And it was extraordinary. So the next morning, me and our guys, we were going to go out for a little jog before the bus leaves. And there's a knock on the door, and it's Prefontaine. And he's got the Oregon registered guard, and he on the inside front page is me like this, winning the 880-yard race.
Wow.
And in it, I still have the newspaper article from that. It's all yellow, but it still has, you can still barely read it. And Steve Bentz, who was the favorite to win, said, I guess I'm going to have to put Veney on my hit list for the Pac-8s. And Prefontaine took us out for a little run around the neighborhood, and we went. See, back then, Sunday paper was only 25 cents. I had a handful of change, and we ran through the area opening up. Now I know this statute of limitations probably run out by now, but we were opening the where the papers were, and we were just grabbing all the papers and running back to the hotel so I could have like 10, 15 copies. My mother was snipping them out and sending them back to family in Pennsylvania and Virginia and Alabama, in New Orleans. She was as proud as anybody could have been, and was my number one greatest fan. But being in Oregon and hearing the cheering and talking to Prefontaine, I'd never met an athlete more driven in my entire life than that guy, who was just, and his tempo runs were my all-out runs. And we were out on the streets running with him, and I said, why don't we slow down so we can catch this next light, because I needed a blow. And finally, I just looked at my watch. I said, Pre, I got to get back, take a shower, because we're leaving soon. I had to cut that run. That cat was amazing.
Awesome.
After that, talk more about your post-collegiate career.
I still trained. Actually, I was running, I was still running 10Ks and running with my athletes up until I was about 31, 32. Started out. Right afterwards, Jim Bush called me and said, hey, Tony, Occidental College. I was fresh out of college. He said they needed a track coach, and they needed somebody to run the women's track team. And I went over and interviewed, and I said, they said, well, when can you start? I said, well, don't you have somebody else to interview? They said, well, look, do you want the job or not? And I said, great, I'll take the job. And I was there for a couple of years. And then Steve Haas, who was the Occidental College coach at the time, made me his assistant cross country and track coach. And Coach McNair came in after Coach Haas left to go to San Jose State, actually. And he was there for a short time. And we were national. I say we because I was an assistant coach at the time, but our men's team were the Division III national champions. in cross country, won it by, I think, 1 or 2 points. And Danny Williams was a senior at Occidental College and won the Division III indoor and outdoor triple jump championships for Occidental College on the men's side. Never had a chance to work with Danny specifically, but he and I have been connected as friends from that time on to this very day. We sort of touch base a couple times a year. And after that, I got married, took a year off from coaching, and then started running again and ended up at St. Bernard's High School, did 4 years there, and got an offer to coach at Capistrano Valley High School. They said, listen, we want you to move out here to Orange County. We're going to get you a job. We have a job for you as a permanent on-site sub. And I just went ahead and got in there. And then the sub job fell through. And I ended up at a little Catholic school in San Pedro. And I had a kid named Mike Trujillo who ran 4:09 in the mile at St. Bernard's High School. And he went on to run for Don Stramitz at Cal State Northridge. So I went to a meet at SC, and I was sitting and listening, sitting next to Stram. And I said, Stramitz, do you know anybody that needs a decent assistant coach? He goes, I do. And he said, well, can you coach the shot put, discus, and javelin? And I said, well, when does school start? He said, in 2 months. I said, I'll learn. And so then at the time, assistant coach Art Venegas was at UCLA. And because I was a Bruin, he let me come in and sit in and learn how to coach the throws. And I was with Northridge for 12 years, until from 1983 up until just before 1996. And took a little time off again. My family was growing, and I felt I needed to spend a little more time. So I spent 2 years at Granada Hills High School as a counselor and teacher, and then the call came again, and Cal State LA offered me. I was an assistant coach for 1 year, and then 2 years I was head men and women's cross country coach, and head women's track coach. And I was there for 2 years, and I was getting ready for my cross country season, and I got a phone call from Gary Winkler, who was at the University of Illinois. He says, Martin Smith at Oregon is going to call you because he wants you. And I went, you got to be kidding. Pac-10? And I went up there, and my wife sat, and we talked about it, and we moved to Oregon. And I was the sprint, hurl, and jump coach for the men for the Ducks for 3 years. And Martin sat me down and says, Tony, in 2 to 3 years, you're going to be a head coach. You can't stay here forever. And then Portland State popped up, and I was at Portland State for 2 years, and went up there and met Phil Knight, and found out a lot of things about, Phil Knight ran cross country for the Ducks. Phil Knight was a business professor at Portland State, and he taught there. And actually the swoosh for the Nike shoe came from one of his business classes when Nike had not gone public yet. And he asked his class to come up with a logo. And this woman came up with something very elegant, very, very simple. She got an A in the class. He paid her $35. And then after Nike went, I don't know if the lady's still alive, but she was getting a penny for every Nike shoe sold. After the fact,
book Shoe Dog.
Yes, and I've got it on my.
We've talked to some of my video about failure and having to grind, and I've talked to AJ, and people. I always say people look at the finished product. Phil Knight, if you read his book, he talks about so many times where Nike wasn't going to make it, and he had to push through, and now it's a juggernaut. You're like, this guy's got it made. But it's the grind is what gets you there. And
Phil Knight is the epitome of the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
What you see above water is the multi-billion-dollar juggernaut. And what you see under, just like you said, Chris, the failures, the shoes that didn't make it, Bill Bowerman actually making all those shoes on his waffle iron.
The waffle racer.
Yeah, and doing those things. And people have told me in the medical profession that his Alzheimer's was probably accelerated by just breathing the fumes of all this burning rubber, that he just sat in a garage and just, ruining all of his wife's waffle irons while he's doing this. But I can just imagine how his life might have been different. But, that was his goal. And so, Oregon, 6 years at UCLA, 10 years at Ventura College, and then got another call to go to Beijing to work with some of their in 2019 to work with some of their Olympic hopefuls. And the day I land, December 3rd, 2019, I'm asking my interpreter, "What's this coronavirus I keep hearing about?"
What? That's right.
And then the country gets shut down.
You got the China.
COVID hits. I'm there for 10 months. But the young guy, one of the young guys that I coached, ended up running 45.3, which is the third fastest time by any Chinese 400-meter runner, a male. And I got back home, and gosh, a week after I got home, I saw an advertisement for Antelope Valley College, and I interviewed for the job and got it. And I've been there ever since now, since January of 2021. So it's been an extraordinary journey for me.
Yeah, and you answered our next question, because that's where we were going. But you've had a great career. You well traveled. You've done Division III. That's what I tell people. You've done high school. You've never been too proud. You've done JC. You've done Elite Division I. You've done all that. One question I'll just piggyback on: how did you go from distance, and then you talked about Stram? That helps a lot. Like, you learned, how do you go from distance to sprints and hurdles, where you're, as a college
because
coach?
when I started at Occidental College, I had a 4x1, I had a 4x4, I had a handful of girls that sprinted, I had one high jumper, and I had one distance runner. And the advice that I was given by people like Art Venegas, he said, "Tony, read." And the very first book I read was The Biomechanics of Track and Field by Eckert. And back in 19, gosh, man, that would have been 1976. I started reading, and then I just started picking up things. I started buying all these books from Track and Field News that I still have on my shelf here in my office, that have been the standard for it. And I just started to learn. And I think what really helped me, I became a good sprint coach faster, because I had a clean slate in my head about what speed and power was about. It took me a while to develop a better distance running philosophy, because I was very, very influenced by my high school coaches and by Hal Harkness. And I mean, we were running 70, 80-mile a week summers and things of that nature. And then I met Brooks Johnson, and Brooks told me that, you need to coach each kid. He says, don't put them all in a funnel, train them all hard. And if you have a great team at the bottom, but you've got 8 or 9 kids hurt, ill, sick, quit, he goes, that's not a win. He says, you put 10 kids in an elevator, and when they all get to the first floor, they may not all run as fast as you want, but they're all going to run as fast as they can. And that philosophy sticks with me to this day. I see Brooks every Wednesday on Zoom with his pack-up program. He's got a Zoom that he does every Wednesday with USA Track and Field. And I go and I jump on, and he's had me speak on a couple of occasions on developing training. But because I had an open mind about sprinting, and I didn't know much about it, I think that really helped me. Jim helped me immensely. Jim was mainly responsible for me getting in the door at UCLA, because he told Art, you need to bring this guy down. He's having success. We need to get him in here. And even after a couple of down years at the Bruins, Jim was saying, well, you need to find another coach. Veney ain't cutting it. You need to get rid of him. So, Jim was just like that. It wasn't personal. Jim was so Bruin that he figured, okay, if this ain't working, we're going to move to here. If this is working, we're going to keep this. And that's just the way it went for him. And he was an amazing man. But yeah, I think the fact that I had an open mind, Tony Wells from Denver, Colorado, Gary Winkler, Lawrence Seagrave, these guys are they're the hoi polloi of track. And I found a thread of speed and power going all the way through, that if you run fast first, everything that you do that's slower is going to be better. And that's what I've really hung my hat on. And you brought it up yourself just now. I love to coach, and I love to coach anybody who wants to be coached. And it really goes back. And if I could tell this real quick story, it all goes back to my high school coach, Frank Hicks. Frank he lived in an apartment on El Segundo, And when we would run by, he would always leave the key to his apartment under the mat. His refrigerator was always stocked with Gatorade and orange juice. So when we're running back and forth up and down El Segundo back to Centennial High School on Central, we could climb the fence at his apartment, go in and drink, and then we'd leave. One Saturday morning, I guess we're laughing, we're making too much noise, and down the hallway comes this beautiful woman in a robe, and she's going, "What are you doing here?" And she's going, "You guys get out of here right now." And she's really giving us the business. Coach Hicks comes down the hallway. He's going, "Baby, these are my boys." She goes, and they go back in the room, and we can hear them arguing, and we can hear something along the lines of, "It's either me or them." And so we go, "We got to get out of here." On Monday at track practice, now I'm 15 years old. I'm thinking, God, I hope I didn't ruin it for my coach. And we're stretching, and coach comes up there, and we all got together and says, "Coach, we need to talk. We're really sorry about what happened. We didn't mean to cause a problem for you. We just won't come by anymore." He goes, No. You guys, don't worry about it. He says, "Yeah, but your girlfriend." He goes, "Listen, you're my guys. I'm going to miss her." And I mean, that was it. We never heard hide nor hair. At that point, I went, this guy dropped this girl for us and for all of us. I mean, I could run 152. We had a guy that couldn't break 10. Coach Hicks coached him just as hard as he coached me.
Yeah. And
that has resonated throughout my career. And I mean, I've got girls at Lancaster out at Antelope Valley that can't break 13 seconds. They can't break 28 seconds of the 2. But you know what? When they PR, parents are excited. They're thrilled. They get a great experience, and they learn a lot about how to push themselves, how to face limits, and maybe try to exceed them. And that's what's always been. Like you said, I've been D3, I've been junior high, I've coached everybody that wants to be coached.
Mm-hmm. You're also a part of several committees. You're involved with coaching education, USA track and field committees. So talk more about what it's like being a part of committees and what it's like serving in them.
Well, it's kind of a pain being part of committees, but there's also a lot of greatness that I've been able to. I was blessed and fortunate to have coached Alice Brown in 1987, and she ran 1091 for 100 meters, and was a gold medalist at the World Championships on the relay. It brought me into contact with some of the people that were involved in sprint development for women. And I became a regional coordinator for the West Coast with the help of Dr. Burt Lyle, who was the chair. And after about 5 or 6 years, he turned the chair over to me. And from about 1990 to 2000, I was the national chair. Plus, I was doing development camps in the Chula Vista. And when we used to have camps and clinics at the Olympic Training Center. Today, I coach level 1, 2, and 3 as coaching education. And I'm also the committee chair for sprints for our USATF track and field committee. It's a lot of work. Sometimes there's a lot that's not involved with coaching that I don't particularly care for, but it's something that I really feel is necessary, that there needs to be a voice for the sprints and the hurdles and the relays for both men and women. And in fact, I've been trying to put together, we're doing a level 3 in Chula Vista in December. I'm teaching level 1 next Friday and Saturday. And then I'm also teaching a level 1 class all the Friday after Thanksgiving. So always keeping my hand in the sport. It's allowed me to travel. And that's one of the things the sport has done for me more than anything else, is the sport has allowed me, I've been on 5 continents. I've been to Europe, Lithuania, Australia, China, Japan, Canada, and it's paid for my education. It's given me a life experience that very seldom most people get an opportunity to have. And that's why I give back to the sport. That's why I work with the committees, and why USA track and field is important to me.
Yeah. Tony's one of my biggest mentors. I mean, even when I was in college, I remember, or after I rode to Stanford with him at Brooks Johnson's clinic, you know, and watched him speak. And I went to level 2, and I get to level 2, and who's my teacher or instructor? Tony. And I had one of the biggest compliments of my life. We had an assignment. I remember Tony said we had to turn something in and write up a workout a certain way. And he said, Chris Asher, this is an A+ paper. I'm going to use this workout. You know, for him to say that to me, because I know Tony's what you call a master coach. He's a master teacher. And he's one of the reasons why I got involved in it. You know, there's a few people, Sam Steen, Strand, but he's one of the reasons why I got involved in committees and stuff. But I was like, man, this can help your career go. You're involved. You get back to the sport. I've been on national teams now. I've been a manager. I've been an assistant coach. You know, he's been a head coach of the Pan Am team, but Tony's continually doing it every year and always doing it. You know, so every time there's an event, I see Tony's teaching. And it's like, so he's a wealth of knowledge, and I'm always learning something from him. So,
you know, it's interesting that you should say that, Chris, because in 1979, maybe 1980. I drove up to Stanford to listen to Brooks. And it was the first time, and it blew my mind. And I went up there for 3 years, and then after leaving, and I'm telling Brooks, I'm sitting in on everything. I'm sitting in the throws, the jumps, the distances, everything. And Brooks says, you know, Tony, I want you to speak next year on the block start. It blew me away. I couldn't believe that he was asking me.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I started teaching in LA 84. I remember I started doing hurdle mobility, and no one was really doing it at the time. And we had a couple people doing it. You know, we had a couple coaches. But I remember doing it, and then I go around now and I see teams warming up and doing stuff, and everyone's doing it. I remember having an NFL client, Antonio Cromartie. I do hurdle mobility. He's
wow, like, yeah, Cromartie. Oh boy.
Yeah, he's like, Coach, when I'm gonna play for the Arizona Cardinals, I put hurdles in the locker room. Then all the players start doing it. You know, it's like, so when you're teaching and you realize people learn it. So sometimes there's stuff I do or drills I've done or created, or like you said, a good coach, a good thief, I've got from some other coaches or whatever. And then I see people do it, and I'm like, man, I've been doing that for years. I am so glad people are doing that now. Like, it's like, okay, it kind of validates yourself. Like, you know, those things I did work, or people know they work and they see it as a benefit.
Absolutely. I think with the amount of information that I've stolen, I think I'd be on death row. I have stolen from so many people. But the thing is, and Tony Wells told me, he said, look at a problem and you got to figure out a way to beat it. And a lot of the drills, and I've modified, I've come up with a couple on my own, but we've all done that, because when you're coaching certain athletes, those athletes force you to. And I've watched you at the track, and I've seen you doing some things. And Chris came up to me. Chris, you came up to me one day at the track, and you said, Tony, look, you need to get one of these. And you held up a whistle. And you said, I hear you yelling all the time. You need to go ahead and get a whistle and just blow and get them going. And I watched you get out there. So I have a whistle, and I got my stopwatch that has a timer on it, and I'm blowing whistle. We're doing whistle fartlek, and I'm blowing it now, because one day I didn't listen to you, and I came up with some laryngitis, and I went, yeah.
Chris, I got an electric whistle now. I got a whistle only have to blow. You just push your button.
Got one too.
So.
Now, just a few last questions as we're winding down this podcast. Talk more about the differences between a head coach and an assistant coach.
Because I've been on both sides of the fence, there's just so much more that, unless the head coach wants to share various parts of the hierarchy of the coaching model, assistant coaches really don't have to be concerned about a lot of the meat of the program. I mean, sure, when I've been an assistant, I've been given things to do, work on travel, make sure that airplane tickets, meal money, check on the grades, and be the academic liaison. But even though it can be spread out to the staff, it all comes back to the head coach, and the head coach still has to formulate all this information he's disseminating and has to be responsible for it. So everything eventually gets laid at the feet of the head coach. And I found that as an assistant and as a head coach, the number one thing that I was taught by my mentors is that if you're going to be a great assistant coach, you have to be. My head coach once told me, one of my head coaches told me, he says, I don't care if you can coach. I can teach you how to coach. You got to have my back. You have to be loyal. And you have to be. So every time you open your mouth, it should sound as if I'm saying it. And one of the things that assistant coaches, young assistant coaches, the mistake they make is if there's a workout on the board and the kids ask the assistant, why are we doing this? If the assistant coach says, well, that's what Coach Veney wants, that's not an affirmation. That's actually a put down, because you're saying, well, that's what Coach Veney wants. Now, if it was me, I learned very quickly when kids would ask me as assistant, why are we doing that? And I said, that's what we do. It's what we do at Northridge.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't say, oh, well, that's what Stramons wants to do. This is what we do. And having that loyalty and being the head coach, and I tell people up front, I'm a micromanager. I do. But I've learned to admit that I'm a micromanager, tell my assistants that I'm a micromanager. You know what my assistants do? They send me emails, they send me a text message, and they tell me that everything is cool, and they don't wait for me to ask. And it really, really helps me be able to focus on some of the things that are out of their hands. Scholarships, like I said, being able to fundraise. And there are so many things that the head coach has to be, because if something does go sideways, it's always the head coach first, that it gets taken care of. Assistants can come and go, but the head coach is got to have their finger not only on the pulse of the team, but of the college or the high school or wherever they are. So I think the real specifics are that the assistant coaches are given jobs to do, but the goals and culture of the program starts from the head coach.
Yeah, very important. Just a couple of comments. I want to piggyback on Tony. I learned that really quickly. You have to be loyal. That was my biggest deal, was being loyal. John Elders was my first head coach. It was great. Me, him, and Coach Kamaka, rest in peace, rest in heaven, we would have some drag out arguments in the office, you know, with the door closed. And I would say what I had to say. But I tell you what, when that door opened, I was on Coach Elders' page. I was, you know, I would tell him my opinion, but then I said, all right, Coach, I told you what I think, and I'm riding with it. You know, I'm riding with you. I just want to tell you, you know, I want you to let you know this is my thing, but I'm writing what you got to say, but I wanted to do my input. I was as a head coach, a little less micromanaging. I wanted my assistants, John Elders, you learn like older coaches or guys who do it for a while, they do a lot more. Like Stram did stuff, he did it so long, he would just do it. Elders was the same way. So for me, when I became a head coach, there's a lot of things I didn't know how to do. And I had told myself, when I become a head coach, I'm going to teach my assistants. I'm going to prepare them to be a head coach, because I always knew they'd leave after 2 or 3 years or 4 or 5 years. So I wanted to prepare them when they went to an interview, they could say, hey, I did this, I did entries, I did fundraising, I did this. So I manage them, but I was a lot more like, hey, you're going to do travel, you're going to do this, and make sure you do it right, you know, and then I'd follow up. So I was that way, but loyalty was one. You have to be on the same page as the staff. You have to have each other's back. And yeah, you can't say, oh, well, Coach Veney said this is a workout. That is the wrong answer for any young person or a coach. You know, you might feel that way. You need to keep that to yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And lastly, we're doing an advice for a next generation series. So what is your advice for a next generation of young athletes out there and also young coaches out there looking to build their careers?
For young athletes, don't take it so personal, you know, get a thicker skin, you know, not to take real hard abuse or anything like that, but be prepared to know that the coaches are working for your benefit and to help you become the best athlete that you can possibly be. And don't take yelling because I'm a yeller. And my athletes know that I yell, but they know that I yell in a way to to promote them and to encourage them. I think for young coaches, make sure that your athletes are clear on what your purpose is. I have all of my athletes write down their goals for the year, and everything I do at the track, everything I do in encouraging them to be great student athletes is based on those goals. If you want to run 12 flat, if you're a girl, you want to run 12 flat and 100, then you need to do 12 flat things. But I also impress upon them the 22 hours you're away from me sets me up to have a great day. Sleep, eat, take care of yourselves, be a good student. Preparation is truly a key. I'm constantly sending out text messages to my athletes the night before meets. Load your bag, check your shoelaces, make sure you got your jersey or your spikes tightened, getting them involved in things. And all of a sudden, I have athletes showing up to me, opening their bag and all their stuff's there. Young people want structure. They want to be given a path, but they're too immature to do it themselves. And that's where we come in. So, don't be afraid as a young coach. If your athletes, they push back, they're not pushing back. Don't take it personal. And for young athletes, if the coach pushes back harder than you pushed, don't take it personal. It's all about trying to get you to the end. And I think I'm just proof of the fact that people were very, very patient with my career and didn't have a problem being constructively critical of some of the moves and things that I did or things that I've said. And I've made a few boners myself in the last 46 years as a coach.
I would just say last thing to figure out your for young coaches and for athletes. Really, I had to learn this. Really good athlete. I was a young coach, and at first I tried to be friends with my athletes. My first job, and I learned right away. I had my athletes tell me, "Coach, you can't try to be friends with us and then try to be tough on us. We're not going to listen." This was, and I changed immediately. I was like, "Wow," because I was a young guy. I'm like, "All right, let me be." And then one thing I really had to learn was, especially because I recruited highly and I got really good kids. The really good kids are going to challenge you, and they're going to ask questions. And when they ask a question about why you're doing something, you better know the answer. You better have a good explanation. Because if you don't, they might be looking for a new coach, So when you're doing your training philosophy or doing something, it can't be I'm doing this because my coach told me this. So anytime an athlete asks me a question, AJ or train, anyone I train, NFL guy, you say, "Hey, why are you doing this, coach?" I can give you an answer. I can give you an answer specifically on why I'm doing it, and it's going to be, pretty much a correct answer. You may disagree, but so that would be my advice, just to piggyback on Tony on that.
No, and that's a really great point. And for me, especially at track practice, when I'm working with speed development with a handful of kids, I can give an answer. But when I'm at track practice and somebody asks me why, I tell them, "Listen, come by my office. Let's sit down and talk this out. Let's watch some video and I'll show you exactly why and where we're going." But I don't answer questions when I've got my whole track team out on the track. Yeah. But just like with Chris, when I've worked with some guys, when I was at Portland State, I had some football players that went to combines and they would ask me about certain things. And I figured out a way to answer their question with the movements that I'm trying to teach. And I know you do exactly the same thing because you show them. And I think that more than anything else gives athletes and gives coaches an opportunity to be able to ask and answer those questions on different levels based on different situations.
Well, Coach Anthony Veney, it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed hearing your story and learning a lot from all the good experiences you've had in your coaching career. So thank you again for coming on the podcast.
Well, I appreciate you having me and love and have a great deal of respect for what you guys are doing again for the sport and what Chris has done. And the thing that I'm most pleased with is Chris has caught up with me a little bit. I see a little bit more gray hair. And,
there's a little just for men going on, Tony.
And I'll bet you, Chris, if you take a microscope and you look under one of those hairs, it's got the name of somebody written on it that caused it to go gray. So I've got plenty of them. But gentlemen, thank you. It's truly an honor because the sport has been so good to me to be able to put something out like this. And you guys are doing something really great and really important for the sport. So I thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Coach. It was a pleasure. Appreciate you coming on.